Welcome to Module 4, Nutritional Considerations for the Organic Dairy Cow. I'm Karen Hoffman with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service in Norwich, New York. This module covers the nutritional requirements of the organically managed dairy cow, including all the essential nutrients needed to meet the required daily intakes at the various stages of development, such as dry cow, fresh cow, pregnant lactating dairy cow, weaned heifer, and so on. The module will also cover the basic process of balancing rations to meet the nutritional requirements under feeding systems typical of an organically managed dairy farm. Finally, the module will instruct participants on how feeds are sampled and submitted for a full nutritional analysis by certified laboratories. In this module, we will discuss the basic design and function of the dairy cow's digestive system and her nutritional requirements at various stages of lactation. There will also be an overview of nutrients and their sources, various forages and feeds, as well as some basics of how to formulate a ration. Other tools and techniques that can assist you in feeding cows correctly and National Organic Program regulations will also be covered. This section begins with a discussion of the cow's physiology and nutritional needs. There are 2 required readings listed here that will help you gain a more complete and deeper understanding of dairy cattle. Successful dairy farms pay close attention to meeting the fluctuating nutritional needs of the dairy cow throughout her life cycle. Sound nutrition pays dividends in a number of ways, including optimal milk production, higher herd health, and reduced cull rates. The table to the right shows the cost associated with nutritionally related diseases. To prevent disease, it's important to balance rations to meet the cow's nutritional demands for protein, energy, vitamins, and minerals at every stage of production. Again, fresh cow, early lactation, late lactation, and dry cow. Deficiencies reveal themselves through poor production, lameness, and other health problems in the herd. The cow is perfectly designed for grazing, from her natural grazing behaviors to her rumen design and function, teeth orientation, and the design of her feet and legs. She's a natural grazing machine. The dairy cow's digestive system is uniquely designed to break down forages, converting cellulose from plant cell walls into energy for the synthesis of milk and other animal proteins for human consumption. Making sure that cows receive all their essential nutrients while grazing can be a challenge because pasture forages fluctuate in quality throughout the year. The ruminant system has 4 compartments: rumen, reticulum, omasum, and abomasum, and the rumen can hold over 30 gallons of material. The rumen is a large fermentation chamber, which we will discuss further in the next few slides. The reticulum is a sac at the front of the rumen that helps to form the cud that a cow regurgitates and chews, and also helps to catch any foreign material that the cow may inadvertently consume and that is indigestible, such as nails or wire, that can cause a condition called hardware disease. The omasum is the next compartment, and that has a number of layers or folds of tissue that work to grind the feed particles down into smaller pieces, and it also absorbs water. The abomasum is known as the true stomach, since it functions much like the simple-stomached animals, pigs, horses, and humans. This compartment releases stomach acids and enzymes that further digest plant material, as well as breaking down microbes that are passing through the system to the small intestine. The rumen has 2 significant advantages over a single stomach, as it has more space for processing large quantities of forages and an environment that is ideal for enormous populations of microorganisms. These organisms are responsible for breaking down feeds, including cellulose and hemicellulose found in plant cell walls. A typical cow rumen will hold 25 to 80 billion bacteria per milliliter and 200,000 to 500,000 protozoa. The number of bacteria will vary depending on the nature of the diet. Many nutritionists refer to the microorganisms as rumen bugs. and the rumen of healthy cows will have 2 contractions per minute to mix the rumen contents. The cow should spend 8 to 10 hours a day ruminating or chewing her cud, and as she re-chews her cud, she adds up to 20 gallons of saliva each day as a buffer, and then she re-swallows the bolus for further digestion. Lactating dairy cows will consume roughly 4% of their mature body weight in total dry matter, known as dry matter demand. Total DMD fluctuates with the stage of production, fresh, early, and late lactation, and with the level of milk production. Larger cows with higher milk production have a higher DMD, as you can see here in this table on the right. Dry matter intake, or DMI, is the dry matter the cow actually consumes. DMI varies with the stage of production and feed quality. The lower quality feeds tend to be less digestible, resulting in a slower movement through the digestion process and yielding less total nutrients to the cow. The diet of the dairy cow needs to include protein, energy, fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Feeds are typically formulated through a ration formulation package to balance the diet for these essential components. Each component of the diet is tested by a nutritional laboratory to determine what each feed has to contribute to the diet. These values are then used to balance the ration for the essential nutrients by weight. 2 terms that are frequently used are as-fed and dry matter. As-fed is an expression of the amount of feed on a wet basis and is used to reference the weight or amount of feed that is actually being fed to the cow. Rations are balanced based on the dry weight because this removes any variability that is due to different water contents. As an example, 50 pounds that is given to a cow that has 50% dry matter provides 25 pounds of DMI. If the feed has a percentage of a nutrient that is based on the dry matter, not on the as-fed amount. An example diet is found on this slide. Each feed is shown as fed, the dry matter percent, the total pounds of dry matter fed, and both the percent protein and pounds of protein fed as per the previous slide. There is some protein coming from each feed ingredient. The ration needs to be 15% protein to support the cow's protein requirement in our example herd, which would be based on the cow type and her milk production level. The total proportion of the diet that is protein is 6.25 pounds, and when you divide that by the 40 pounds of total dry matter, the result is the ration has 15.6% protein. Therefore, this diet is balanced for protein. The next steps would be to do the same for fiber, energy, vitamins, and minerals. Lactating dairy cows have the most complex nutritional requirements, and the requirements change through early, mid, and late lactation. Thus, it is difficult to balance one ration for a whole herd or group of cows without over or underfeeding some of them at all times, unless you are a seasonal dairy. The greatest demand for nutrients comes 50 to 90 days after the cow calves, when she approaches and is at the peak of her milk production. Some nutritional considerations to be aware of during peak production include the fact that energy and protein needs are greater than what she can consume in her feed, so usually body condition goes down. This is because early lactation cows mobilize body energy stores like fat and other tissue to meet those needs. If body condition goes too low, it is difficult to put back on it later in their lactation. So it's really important to keep an eye on body condition. It's critical to feed enough nutrients at peak production to also minimize stress, as the immune system can become compromised under stress and result in other health issues. Ensure that intake increases as quickly as possible after calving so she gets as many nutrients as she can. Offer high-quality forage and supplement with grain to boost both energy and intake and protein intake. The total dry matter intake of forage and grain at her peak production should be between 3.5% and 4% of her body weight. So make sure you're feeding the correct quantities by measuring feeds and checking for changes in dry matter content on your forages. Organic grain can be fairly expensive, so organic dairy farmers often feed less grain than the average conventional farm, which requires extra attention during this peak production period. Providing a grain-to-milk ratio at peak of about 1 to 4 or less, in other words, 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, provides some extra nutrients a little less expensively. However, the total nutrients required by the cow may be more than what is provided when you drop that grain rate back. So milk production, body condition, or breeding success may be limited. This is a choice that each farm needs to make based upon costs and cash flow. Feeding some grain prior to calving helps the rumen bacteria to adjust to it, especially if none was fed during the early dry period. After calving, you'll be able to increase it more quickly than if no grain is fed before calving. And then after calving, increase the grain feeding rates by 1 pound every 3 to 4 days, because otherwise metabolic problems such as acidosis and additional stress may compromise the immune system. Once cows pass peak production, they eat what they need for production plus maintenance and breeding. Whereas before peak they were in negative balance, they return to a positive balance after peak, allowing them to start ovulating and returning body reserves. The gray shaded area between the milk energy and feed energy lines represents the amount of energy that the diet is lacking in that first lactation trimester compared to the need for energy for milk production, which is why we end up with the negative energy balance. As cows approach the end of their lactation, they should have good body condition but not be overly fat. Cows that are fat during the dry period can have metabolic problems after calving, such as ketosis. If they're still milking fairly well close to 60 to 45 days before their due date, you can change the ration to help them reduce their production before drying off. Body condition is an important nutritional consideration to think about during this time period. They should score around 3.5 to 3.75 on a scale of 1 to 5, which will be discussed in more detail later in this module. Thinner cows should be fed more energy to increase body condition before drying off. Milking cows gain weight more easily because their metabolism is still high and they convert energy to fat more easily. Metabolism slows down in the dry period, and trying to increase condition at this stage will require more feed and increase your costs. Fatter cows need to have the amount of energy in their diet reduced to drop body condition and prevent health and/or metabolic problems after calving and into the first month of lactation. High producers should have their intake restricted and be fed lower quality forage. This will minimize udder pain when they're dried off and minimize the chance of mastitis in the next lactation due to any related stress or immune system effects. If you do need to dry up a cow quickly, you can restrict water intake, but no more than a 30% reduction in water intake because other health problems due to dehydration may result if water is more limited. There are 2 stages of the dry period to consider from a nutritional standpoint. The first of these is the early dry period, the first 30 days after cows dry off, and the second is the transition or close-up period, which is the final 2 to 4 weeks before the cow calves, when her nutritional requirements begin to increase. During the early dry period, cows can be maintained on forages and minerals alone unless there appears to be other nutritional issues, such as a need to put on some body condition. The transition or close-up period in the 2 to 4 weeks pre-calving is the more challenging part of the dry period. To manage cows during this time, it helps to understand the metabolic changes a cow undergoes during the transition. Through the dry period, the cow primarily uses nutrients for fetal growth because the unborn calf grows most rapidly during the last trimester or 90 days of gestation. This means that protein and energy requirements significantly increase as calving date approaches. However, dry matter intake decreases as calving approaches, and therefore cows require a higher nutrient density ration. Starting to feed better quality forages and some grain, or some of the ration fed to the milking cows, can help to boost their nutrient status during this time. We will now move into a discussion of the major nutrients required by cows, as well as good sources of each from both forages and grain. Protein will be the first nutrient we discuss. This is a primary nutrient needed for growth and production. Proteins are various combinations of amino acids and peptides and are one of the major sources of nitrogen. There are different types of protein classified by how the ruminant animal utilizes them. The following list includes terms and simple definitions. Crude protein is the total protein in a feed or a forage, including all the different protein fractions. It is calculated by determining the amount of nitrogen in the feed and multiplying it by 6.25, because there are 16 grams of nitrogen in 100 grams of protein. So if you divide 100 by 16, the result is 6.25. The term crude reflects that it also includes some non-protein nitrogen, so it is usually a little inaccurate. Bypass protein is also called undegradable protein or rumen undegraded protein with the abbreviation of RUP. This protein cannot be broken down to basic peptides or amino acids by rumen microbes. It bypasses digestion in the rumen, but the animal uses it once it reaches the enzymes and acids in the lower gut or abomasum. In general, RUP should make up 40% of the crude protein portion of rations for milking cows. Degradable protein is also known as rumen degradable protein, or RDP, and is the opposite of bypass protein. Rumen microbes break it down into peptides and amino acids, and also some of it is used to reproduce the microbes. When digested feed moves out of the rumen, some microbes go along as well. Without their ability to reproduce, the rumen would quickly lose function. The degradable protein is incorporated into the rumen microbes for the animal to use in the abomasum and the intestines as well. Soluble protein is the most confusing term in protein nutrition because it's part of the degradable protein. Soluble protein is easily dissolved and quickly used in the rumen by the microbes. It includes some non-protein nitrogen that moves into the liquid and includes sources like urea, which is naturally found in some feeds. Many fermented feeds have a high soluble protein level because fermentation can create or transform proteins into a soluble form. Rations for milking cows should target 30% soluble protein in the diet. Grain sources of protein include soybean meal and soybean byproducts such as extruded, roasted, or expelled soy, distillers and brewers grains, canola meal, flaxseed meal, sunflower meal, field peas, corn gluten meal or corn gluten feed, and peanut meal. Many of these may not be available in certified organic form in your area, so check on their availability first. Organic protein grain sources are usually expensive, so for this reason, growing your own high-protein forage supply is worth considering to minimize the amount you need to purchase. Energy is the next nutrient and is essential for growth and development. All living animals require 5 to 6 times more energy on a daily basis than they do protein. Energy is not easily measured, so it is usually estimated from other components of the feed, such as fiber levels and digestibility. Common terms are based upon the net energy system, and other terms you may hear include total digestible nutrients, or TDN, metabolizable energy, or ME, and digestible energy, DE, but are not common in practical on-farm use. The net energy system with NEM, NEG, and NEL describes the amount of energy the animal uses, or nets, for different functions. The NEL requirement tells us how much of the energy consumed is needed or utilized for lactation. The NEL value for milking cows includes both the maintenance and growth requirements, but for other classes of animals such as heifers, NEG for net energy of gain is used. Total digestible nutrients is not used to balance energy requirements, but is a method to compare feed quality, as it is a measure of feed energy content. A high TDN value indicates that the nutrients in the feed are highly digestible, enabling the animal to derive a higher energy value from the feed. A low TDN value indicates low energy feed that the animal will not utilize as well. Relative feed value is also used to compare feed quality, but not specifically energy. A relative feed value of 100 is the standard and reflects the quality of alfalfa hay with 41% ADF and 53% NDF, which are fiber measurements and will be discussed next. The higher the RFV, or relative feed value, the better the forage. Forages are also a source of energy. Corn silage provides energy through both the grain and stover, as the rumen bacteria can easily digest the fiber in the stover. Ruminal digestion of fiber produces chemical byproducts called volatile fatty acids, or VFAs, and they are acetic, propionic, and butyric acids. The animal derives energies from VFAs, and pasture and high-quality hay crops provide more energy to the animal via the high digestible fiber. Some alternative forage crops, such as sorghum sudan grass, small grain silages, and brassicas, are high in energy due to low fiber values and higher fiber digestibility. Grain energy sources, such as corn, barley, oats, wheat, and cereal grains like spelt, have high carbohydrate levels. These grains are typically less expensive than protein sources, but are still expensive and suggest that high-quality forages are important for profitability. These grains have high levels of sugars and starches, frequently referred to as either non-fiber carbohydrates, NFC, or non-structural carbohydrates, NSC. The fiber fraction of plants has three main compounds, and they are all part of the plant cell wall that surrounds the fluid part of each cell. These fiber compounds are cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin, all intertwined and complex together in the cell wall. Cellulose is a straight chain of sugar molecules. It is easily broken down by rumen bacteria. Hemicellulose is also a chain of sugar molecules, but has branches along the chain. Lignin is a mostly indigestible compound. It goes through the animal virtually unchanged. Pectin and other organic acids are also part of the cell wall, but are not considered to be a component of the fiber. Acid detergent fiber, or ADF, is the cellulose and lignin as determined by a chemical procedure that washes away all the other plant components, leaving these fiber components intact. The ADF value estimates the energy content of feeds, and the lower the ADF value, the higher the energy. Neutral detergent fiber, or NDF, is cellulose, lignin, and hemicellulose. The NDF value predicts intake, and if NDF is low, animals are able to consume more feed. Forages are an excellent source of fiber, as are some byproduct feeds such as soy hulls and cottonseed that can be added into a ration when fiber is needed. Vitamins and minerals are a nutrient class that farmers often overlook because traditionally they have used a standardized premix from a feed company to supplement vitamins and minerals. Oftentimes, these premixes provide more minerals than needed, and conversely, animals sometimes become mineral deficient if not enough attention is paid to the mineral program. In an organic dairy, Minerals are important to maintain healthy animals. A mineral imbalance, either in excess or in deficit, will weaken the immune system and contribute to other health problems. Required major minerals include calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, sodium, chlorine, and sulfur. They all play key roles in various metabolic processes, as well as in the structure and function of different tissues and body fluids. Trace minerals include cobalt, copper, iodine, iron, zinc, manganese, molybdenum, boron, and selenium, and are important for the function of enzymes and hormones in the body. Since they support immune function, an imbalance could have a negative impact. Vitamins A, D, and E are important for cell function and many metabolic pathways. The precursor of vitamin A is beta-carotene, which is plentiful in the green chlorophyll of fresh pasture, and the skin synthesizes vitamin D when exposed to sunlight. During the grazing season, a reduction in vitamin supplementation may be appropriate, except for vitamin E, which does need to be supplemented year-round. Vitamins should be increased upon returning to winter confinement feeding. All forages and feeds have varying levels of different minerals, so the best way to know how much of each mineral is coming into your ration from the different feeds is to have a forage analysis run. Grains and forages provide both protein and energy. Common forage sources include dry hay, which can be alfalfa or a grass mixed legume, haylage or baleage, which also can be alfalfa or a grass and mixed legume, managed pasture, and corn silage. If you can grow, harvest, and store higher quality forages through timely management and good planning, you will minimize the amount of nutrients that need to be provided through grain supplementation and reduce your costs of production. Grain sources of protein include soybean meal or treated soy products such as roasted or extruded soybeans, distillers or brewers grains, canola, flaxseed, or sunflower, corn gluten or peanut meal, and field peas. Many of these may not be available certified organic in your area, so be sure to check availability first. Organic protein grain sources are usually expensive, so growing your own high-protein forage supply is again encouraged. Grain energy sources have high carbohydrate levels. The most common grains available are corn, barley, oats, wheat, and some other small cereal grains. These grains are typically less expensive than protein sources, but are still costly in certified organic. This table contains protein and energy values for common organic feed grains. If you're trying to decide between different ingredients, you should consider both the nutrient levels and the price. For example, a feed that is higher in both protein and price might cost less per pound of protein than one that has lower values for protein and price. Now that we've discussed nutrient requirements and feed sources, we're going to move on to the next step of forage analysis and how to interpret the results. An analysis is only as good as the sample submitted. Taking a good representative sample of your feed is the first and most critical step of the analysis process, yet it is often the step that is most taken for granted. Following good sampling procedures will help ensure that your analytical results truly reflect the nutrient composition of your sample and will be useful in developing your feeding program. The key to submitting a good sample is to collect several subsamples to form a composite. Remember, the sample that you submit for analysis is going to represent several tons of feed. Thus, you want to be sure that it represents a good cross-section of the feed, not just one bale or a few inches off your silo. If you have different types of hay, or different cuttings or lots, those should all be sampled separately. Using a hay probe, bore 12 to 20 bales selected at random through the small square end or from the side towards the center if you have round bales. Combine all the core samples and submit for analysis. When sampling silage, collect only material that has been freshly unloaded. Grab handfuls of silage from 12 to 20 locations in the unloaded silo pile, from the feed bunk, or from in front of 12 to 20 cows that have been fed. Sampling locations on the silo should vary from top to bottom and left to right. All subsamples should be combined and thoroughly mixed in a clean plastic bucket to form a composite sample. Submit 1 pound of the composite for analysis. Total mixed rations can also be analyzed, but you should collect only freshly blended rations and use the same method as the silage collection. In a pasture, randomly select 12 to 20 sites where the animals will be grazing within the next day or two and clip a handful of forage at grazing height. It may be advantageous to watch the animals graze to learn what forages they are selecting to eat and which they are avoiding. It doesn't make sense to sample something they won't eat. All subsamples should be combined and thoroughly mixed in a clean plastic bucket to form a composite, and further cutting the forage into 2 to 3 inch pieces aids in blending. Take a 1 pound sample, pack tightly in a plastic bag, and freeze it for 12 hours prior to submitting for analysis. Freezing will help prevent marked chemical changes due to respiration or fermentation. If you grow your own grain, it may be worth sampling to find out the quality, and you could also identify any opportunity areas for improving the nutrient profile. Randomly collect 12 to 20 samples and combine in a clean plastic bucket. Thoroughly blend the composite and submit 1 pound for analysis. If you are purchasing grain from a feed mill or a broker, they may have an analysis available for you to use, and if you are buying a grain mix, they should be able to provide you with some nutritional information. Forage sample results are a starting point for developing rations for animals on the farm. They help prioritize which forages to feed to different groups of animals, feeding the best quality to those with the highest nutritional needs, such as calves and milking cows. The reports list important nutrients such as the protein, the energy, fiber, and minerals, and can be used to formulate a basic ration either by hand or with computer software. The table here identifies the recommended minimum forage quality for each type of forage you may produce on your farm. If you can meet these minimums, it will help to keep purchase feed costs low. Many organic dairy farms do not have a nutritionist available to help with balancing rations, simply because there are not that many nutritionists who work with organics in general. There are some simple ways to balance rations that a nutritionist isn't needed for, as long as you know the major nutrient requirements and have nutrient analyses on your forages. Also, if you have the ability to feed cows individually or group them by production, you can use this data to identify the changes you should make in different lactation stages. The steps shown here put into practice the basic concepts we have already covered. Determining dry matter intake, protein requirements, protein supplied, and energy needed are fairly simple calculations, and much of the information needed for them can be found on tables available here and in the resource books mentioned at the beginning, as well as your forage analyses. Let's walk through an example of balancing a ration for peak production. Let's say our herd is a Holstein Jersey crossbred herd of 1,200 pound cows peaking at 80 pounds of milk on pasture and represents the average performance of cows on Northeast farms. This example calculates for dry matter and then converts it to as fed. So step 1 is to determine the total dry matter intake, where we take the weight of the cow times the percent body weight using the table on the next slide, which gives us our dry matter intake. The dry matter intake comes out to 42 pounds of dry matter intake. During the pasture season, high-quality forage is on hand, so we can target 70% forage in the diet, which is 29.4 pounds of forage, or 42 times 70%. The balance will be from grain, or 12.6 pounds, because 42 subtracting out that 29.4 pounds of forage gives you a grain-to-milk ratio of 1:5. In step 2, we determine how many pounds of protein they need by multiplying the pounds of dry matter times the percent protein needed. Using the table below, we see that at peak the range is 14.5% to 17% protein, and that gives us 7.14 pounds of protein. In step 3, we calculate how much of that protein is met by your forages. The forage analysis for this example is 21.4 pounds of a 22% crude protein pasture, 5 pounds of an 8% crude protein corn silage, and 3 pounds of a 12% crude protein hay. Since the total forage dry matter is our target of 29.4 pounds, the calculations of protein are as follows. We take the dry matter weight times the percent protein to calculate the pounds of protein that each forage is contributing. So the pasture provides 4.71 pounds. The corn silage and hay add just under 0.76 pounds, so we have a total of 5.47 pounds of protein. According to the calculations, the ration is short of the protein requirement as calculated in step 2 by 1.67 pounds. So more protein will need to be provided by the grain mix. The calculation for how much protein needs to be in the grain is the amount needed, or the 1.67 pounds, divided by the target amount of grain, 12.6 pounds. So we find that the protein level of the grain needs to be 13%, which is actually very affordable. To emphasize the importance of forage quality, if the pastures were higher in protein, at 27%, the ration would only be short by 0.6 pounds of protein, and a little bit of cornmeal would help to meet that protein requirement. We now need to determine how much energy they need from grain, which is step 4. They need between 35 and 38 megacals per day based on the previous table of requirements. The pasture will provide 0.68 megacals per pound. The corn silage provides 0.75 megacals per pound, and the hay provides 0.53 if we meet that minimum forage quality goal from the earlier table. To calculate the total energy in the forage, we take the feed weight times the energy from the feed in megacals per pound, and that gives us the energy provided by each feed, essentially the same process we use to calculate protein. According to the calculations, the forages provide 19.89 megacals, so the grain must provide at least 15.11 megacals to meet the 35 megacals per day requirement. The last step is to calculate the energy density needed in the grain per pound of feed. We take the needed energy, our 15.11 megacals, divided by the total pounds of grain in the ration, or 12.6, and we find that we need 1.2 megacals per pound of grain fed from the grain. It is important to note that the number above is the energy per pound of grain fed, not the total amount of energy in the total grain fed. Unfortunately, not many certified organic grain products meet this energy requirement, as energy density of grains is usually less than 1 megacal per pound. Thus, there are only a few options for this ration. Feed more grain and less forage, improve forage quality to meet the guidelines, or include molasses as an energy source. It may make sense to feed a higher grain rate, such as 1:4, until cows are past peak production and in positive energy balance. If no changes are made to the ration, it is likely that these cows would lose milk production, body condition, or have trouble breeding back. If you'd like, try the ration balancing exercise using numbers from your farm or with farms you work with to become familiar with this method. Also, it's a good idea to double check your rations periodically to ensure you meet the protein and energy requirements. Check different subsets of cows, such as those in later lactation producing less milk. If you change forages, reanalyze them and check that requirements are still being met. Lastly, be aware of other changes, such as significant shifts in production or body condition, and determine if the ration is still on target. One issue to be aware of during the grazing season is that pasture forage changes in both quality and quantity through the growing season due to changes in sunlight, temperature, and moisture. If you have a pasture management plan, monitoring the changes can help you to maintain a consistent ration, which will maintain and possibly improve your milk production. It will also help you to make decisions on your pasture management, such as when to increase paddock sizes because forage is becoming more limited, or to increase forage supplementation to slow down the grazing rotation. Refer to Module 5, Organic Pasture Management, for additional information on pasture management. If pastures are well managed and high quality, 60 to 100% of the animal's intake can be achieved from pasture. As the table shows, it is higher in protein and energy and lower in fiber than other hay crops. It will be as high as 30% protein in early spring, which can reduce or eliminate all purchased protein during the grazing season. In midsummer, there may be a reduction of protein due to hotter and drier weather, so sampling pastures in spring, summer, and fall can aid in properly supplementing your herd. Since organic protein sources are expensive, the more pasture used, the lower costs will be. Recent research has shown that overfeeding protein in the barn reduces pasture intake because the cows can sense a nutrient overload. Protein from pasture is highly rumen degradable, however, and rumen bacteria convert extra degradable protein into ammonia if they cannot utilize it. The flow chart here shows the ideal situation on the left, where the rumen microbes can utilize the protein and the cow can use the protein for production. On the right side is what happens when protein is in excess. It costs the cows energy to first convert the protein to ammonia and absorb it through the rumen into the blood, and then convert the ammonia to urea in the liver for excretion. This scenario can contribute to loss of milk production and body condition. Thus, the protein balance is essential. The most important nutrient to feed is energy, which encourages cows to seek out high protein pasture and helps the rumen microbes to use the protein rather than waste it. Sourcing certified organic feeds is an important topic to discuss. A challenge feeding dairy animals under organic management is finding adequate quantities of certified organic grains and forages, although many people forget about sourcing forages because grain seems to be foremost in their minds. Consider the following things before transitioning especially, but also once you are certified to ensure you can meet the requirements of your herd with adequate organic feed. First, make sure you have a reliable supplier of organic grain. There are a few small to medium-sized mills that handle organic grain, so make sure they have enough to supply your needs and have a good reputation for service. Consider growing organic grains yourself if you have difficulty finding a supplier. Although many feed companies sell certified organic grains, supply is still lower than the demand, resulting in high prices. You may be able to grow it less expensively than you can purchase it. Produce your own high-quality forage to reduce grain needs. Make sure you calculate the forage production on your farm every year and identify potential shortfalls that may result by increasing the total forage in the ration. This will help you plan in advance if forages need to be purchased, so you can purchase higher quality forage at a lower cost before your inventory is low. Also, make sure you see what you're going to purchase before buying to make sure it is high quality forage. You can ask for a forage analysis in advance of purchasing and request both the results and crop organic certification records to verify that what was tested is what you are purchasing. The majority of organic farmers feed their herds a ration comprised primarily of hay crops, such as pasture, dry hay, haylage, or baleage. Many of them have eliminated corn silage from the ration, as it is difficult to grow organically. Furthermore, fermented feeds like corn silage increase rumen acidity, which may cause herd health problems or reduced immunity if they are fed at a high rate or if the fermentation of those forages is poor. Some organic dairy farmers have eliminated corn silage to reduce labor and create a simpler system. However, those who continue to feed corn silage do so for the energy benefits it can provide, as well as adding diversity to their crop rotation. Organic dairy production requires that all animals more than 6 months of age graze pasture during the growing season. Pasture should be treated as any other crop with a high level of management. Anything that looks like a swamp, brush lot, exercise area, or mountainside is not the kind of pasture you should have for organic production. On the other hand, pasture that contains lush green grass and legume combinations, is 6 to 8 inches tall, has high plant diversity and density, and moves animals from paddock to paddock on a regular basis is the kind of pasture you should have. Grazing requires a different feeding strategy, as discussed earlier. There is also a pasture management chapter that you should review if you have not yet. Routinely taking the time to look at body condition on your cows, bred heifers, and dry cows is important. Body condition scoring indicates your cow's energy status as they mobilize fat in the early stages of lactation. They should not lose more than 1 condition score from calving until just past their peak milk production. If they do, it will be difficult for them to gain it back before they dry off. You should also score your bred heifers and dry cows to ensure they are neither too fat nor too thin at calving times. The system of body condition scoring for dairy cattle uses a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being extremely thin and 5 being extremely fat. The average of the milking cows in herds that calve year-round should be close to 3. In seasonal herds, the average is 3 by 150 to 175 days in milk. There should not be any 1s or 5s in your herd. If there are, determine why and develop a plan to improve body condition. Dry cows and heifers should have a body condition of at least 3 and no more than 4. The body condition scoring system uses fractions of whole numbers or a plus-minus system to describe cows that are in between scores. A cow with a little more condition than a 3 might be described as a 3.25 or 3.5, and one with less condition might be a 2.75 or 2.5. The most important places to look for condition are on the short ribs, spine, and around the tail head. If there is more bone definition in these areas, the lower the condition the cow is, and vice versa. If there's less bone showing, it means that they have more condition. Grazing cows have better muscle tone due to walking, so do not confuse an athletic cow with a thin one. 1 condition score is equivalent to about 200 megacals of net energy for lactation. So if cows are too thin by 100 days in milk, they will need to be fed 1 megacal per day extra for the last 200 days to put that condition back on before drying off. If you wait longer than 100 days to assess them, the ration will need to have even more energy. Assessing and recording body condition score every month or 2 will help you discover problems before it is too late to fix them. Have someone who does not see the cows every day do the scoring for you, as their assessment may be more objective. Also, recognize there are some cows that are simply thin all the time, no matter how well you feed them. You may want to exclude those cows from the average, as well as any cows that have struggled with other health problems and become thin. Manure scoring can help evaluate how well the ration is balanced for protein, fiber, and carbohydrates. It can also assess if the cows are digesting the feed correctly and if water intake is appropriate. This tool is helpful in evaluating pasture-based diets, as the manure gives a good indication of whether too much protein is being supplemented, too much forage is being fed in the barn, or whether the rumen microbes are utilizing grain for energy. Once again, this system uses a score of 1 to 5, with 1 being very liquid and 5 being very stiff. In practical use, a score of 1 would slide off your boot, a score of 3 would stick to your boot, and a score of 5 would bounce off your boot. In a score 1 manure, it is very runny with the consistency of pea soup. The manure may arc from the rump of the cow when she lifts her tail to excrete it. Excess protein or lack of fiber can lead to this consistency, typical of early spring pasture-based diets. If score 1 continues past early spring, too much protein may be supplemented in the barn at this time. Cows with diarrhea or Johne's disease will also score in this category, so you may want to talk to your veterinarian about those possibilities. With score 2, manure is runny and does not form a distinct pile, but it splatters when it hits the ground or the concrete. This is typical of cows on pasture after the spring flush and if little supplemental forage is being fed in the barn. If seen in full stored forage confinement feeding, the cows may lack adequate fiber in their diet and possibly have acidosis. With score 3, manure has the appearance of pudding and will form a pile with concentric rings around a small depression in the middle. It makes a plopping sound when it hits the floor or ground and sticks to shoes, pasture sticks, and the flanks of cows that lay in it. Cows fed pasture, some stored forage, and adequate energy without extra protein will attain this manure score. Cows on stored forages in the winter with a properly balanced grain mix will also produce this kind of manure. Score 3 is optimal. Score 4. The manure is considerably thicker and will make a taller pile. It will stick to your shoe, but is not as easily wiped off as with score 3 manure. This is more typical of dry cows, older heifers, and any group of animals fed low-quality forages. It may also indicate a lack of protein in the diet. And lastly, score 5. The manure is stiff, firm, and possibly in the shape of a ball. This indicates extremely low-quality forage, a digestive blockage, or dehydration. If you feed relatively good quality forage and see manure of this consistency, you need to call a veterinarian because death of the animal is possible due to digestive blockage or dehydration. Many factors influence the success of your nutrition program. It is important to understand how your cows utilize feeds and nutrients, and then to provide them with the nutrients they require. The best strategy is to have the highest quality forages and good pasture management, as you will be able to minimize purchase feed costs. It's also important to make sure you're meeting the NOP requirements for grazing and certified organic feeds. Successful managers utilize tools such as body condition and manure scoring to assess whether or not their feeding program is on target, and then to make good decisions on how to improve when there are opportunities to do so. There are a number of additional resources about dairy nutrition available online and in print. Articles are available on eOrganic and are referenced in your course materials. The book Prescribed Grazing and Feeding Management for Lactating Dairy Cows by Hoffman, DeClue, and Emick is available from USDA NRCS and is a good overview of both pasture management and supplementation strategies. There is also Graze magazine available by subscription that includes grazing, feeding, and organic dairy features. All of these are referenced in your course materials. Thank you very much for listening today, and good luck with your feeding program.